Hello, everyone. I am Brian Mears, and welcome to Inside the Lab. There are my co-hosts. Let's get Ian's video up here. Cool. All right, we're all good here. Awesome. Again, I'm Brian. I'm joined here by Ian and Matthew Freeman, and we are doing this live show every Sunday for a couple minutes. We're going to run through notable injuries, how that affects projection changes, thoughts on props, all sort of fun stuff. And all right, let's jump right into it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can all be on the same page here. All right, this is our injury dashboard that we have every week that Ian puts up. Ian, all right, let's start with, I guess, the biggest injury, although I guess we can debate how much it's really going to affect the slate. Sam Bradford being ruled out. Thoughts on sort of the rest of the team, and then Matt, I'll get your thoughts after that.
Yeah, so with Bradford out, we got Case Keenum starting at QB. It's nice he doesn't have Jeff Fisher holding him down anymore, but it's still fair to question how much of an NFL quarterback he is. For that reason, we've Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, Kyle Rudolph. Really, the whole Vikings offense is taking a pretty big hit in this Pittsburgh game. We've already seen the line drop a good 3 points since the news came out. So those have been the biggest changes so far.
Yeah, Freeman, what are your thoughts here? Thielen was sort of an interesting play. Assuming that really Minnesota, you don't really want any pieces of them now with Keenum starting. And what are your thoughts on maybe the Pittsburgh defense?
Well, it is interesting because I could almost see them starting to venture into contrarian mode. I think it's a question as to, it hurts everyone, but which wide receiver does this hurt more? Diggs and Thielen were both already significantly, I think, underpriced relative to their upside. And Keenan does have a history of targeting number one wide receivers. It's just a question of whether he would go with Diggs or with Thielen. Diggs is running more of his routes outside the numbers. I don't know. I wouldn't play either of these guys in cash, but I could see there being a reason for this being a contrarian stack, just because I think a lot of people are going to go away from this situation pretty hard. But we should remember that Case Keenum did have some decent games back in the day with Houston. But yeah, if you wanted to go with the Steelers defense, I'd have no problem with that. And I think this also probably gives a bump up to some of the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive players like Le'Veon Bell might get a couple more carries because they just have much more positive game script.
Matt, what were your thoughts on Dalvin Cook going into this game, and what are your thoughts on him now?
He did well in his first game, but I've never been much of a Dalvin Cook truther. I think this significantly hurts him just because Minnesota is going to have to stay close in order for them to warrant giving him those carries, and I think he's much less likely to get those carries now. So I think it significantly dings him. I think it dings him actually a little bit more than it does the receivers because they're still going to get targets.
Yeah, that's a good point. Ian, let's bump to some other injury news. Bradford, obviously maybe the surprising one for people who are waking up Sunday having to set their lineups. Any other big surprises, or was that pretty much it?
A few guys get confirmed that we thought would be out, though. One guy, Jermaine Gresham, the Cardinals tight end, he's out, and we're looking at Troy Nicholas and Jim Dre, who was just signed this week to kind of be the tight end for the Cardinals. Colts were just about the worst tight end defense in the league last year, but it's hard to really know how much Palmer is going to look for his guy there. Big question, and I guess Arizona is where these targets going to go without any David Johnson or John Brown this week. So Larry Fitzgerald and J.J. Nelson are at the top of our models right now as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, Freeman, we've been talking all week about whether Carson Palmer is his own issue, but whether he's good enough to where we could actually trust Fitzgerald and J.J. Nelson and these guys, even in cash, probably not with these two high total games, but definitely intriguing on this left side of the offense. What are your thoughts? Does the Gresham news really change anything? Or are we still just really high on the guys who were?
I think it helps. It helps Fitz a little bit. I want all the JJ Nelson, and I wish we had other guys like Levitan. I would love to get people's thoughts on this, but I think JJ Nelson is bordering on cash eligible if you actually need some savings and just your roster construction encourages you to go with a guy that cheap. But JJ Nelson, whenever he gets snaps, he has gotten some major production. So in his, I think 6 career games with 60% of the snaps played, he's had 84 yards and close to a touchdown per game. Like, it's been pretty significant. In his 5 career games without Michael Floyd, and obviously Floyd is not there now, he's had 86 receiving yards per game, 0.8 touchdowns per game. There are a lot of ways you can slice it, but basically whenever he's been on the field for more than like 30% of the snaps, he's had some pretty big production, and he's going to be on the field a lot, in part because they're not going to be running 2 tight end sets. They do that sometimes, but they're definitely not going to be doing that nearly as often now with the tight ends that they have. So they're going to be running many more 3 wide receiver sets. I think he could be out there even in 2 wide receiver sets, just because Jerron Brown is like walking dead out there at wide receiver. Like he played 72% of the snaps last week, didn't get targeted once. Like, he's not a wide receiver. So JJ Nelson, I want all the JJ Nelson and all the Larry Fitz.
Yeah, so there's a couple like cheap wide receivers. Not that these guys are all in like the same exact price range, but like guys like JJ Nelson, Marquise Lee, Cooper Kupp, like guys like that. How would you rank sort of like the low end guys? Like would JJ Nelson be your favorite guy, like under like 45?
Yeah, easily at the top. I would have Kupp underneath him, and then Lee would be underneath those guys. I understand the argument for Lee, but I'm just not very bullish on that offense in general, especially with Bortles and them wanting to run so much. But yeah, in this situation, they want to throw the ball. And then Cooper Kupp, he's just a competent all-around wide receiver. And we saw him do it last week. He's sort of one of the reasons why you should be decently excited about Larry Fitzgerald this week going against the same incompetent defense.
Yeah, Tyrell the Gazelle, probably another guy I should have thrown in there as well. Ian, before we move off of this game to other injuries, what are your thoughts? Have we gotten any news or any clarity at all on the backfield situation?
Yeah, so it looks like Kerwin's going to be the guy out there when, first drive of the game. He'll start with CJ2K as his kind of direct backup. They're still looking at Andre Ellington as essentially more of just a passing down back than an actual running back again, which makes sense. I mean, he was literally switched to wide receiver last season. But our kind of thoughts on the situation is that Kerwin's going to get the chance to be the guy. We'll see if he can be. If he's gashing the defense drive 1, it's hard to believe that they'll start a committee after that. But if Kerwin's struggling a little bit with his Colts D, don't be surprised to see all 3 backs on the field pretty quickly.
Yeah, fair enough, for sure. Definitely an interesting spot. Didn't want to spend most of the show on the Cardinals, but I think it's just a really interesting spot with those 2 high total games today, and the Cardinals against the Colts. They're not getting overlooked. We have JJ Nelson 17 to 20% projected ownership, Fitz 13.6. So it's not like they're going to be low owned guys, but definitely not as high as some of these like Julio guys, for sure. All right, Ian, let's talk any other notable injuries that the users should know about.
Yeah, big one. It was confirmed it happened actually Friday, but we can still talk about it. Jason Verrett for the Chargers, their number 1 or number 2 cornerback, depending on how you feel about Casey Hayward, is out. So that's a nice bump. We're thinking for Jarvis Landry and Kenny Stills, just because Casey Hayward's one of the very few shadow corners really in the league right now. But we'll kind of see where he ends up lining up with this new formation, because Trevor Williams right now is basically an undrafted free agent, and he's stepping in to get major snaps against Landry. So we'll see how that goes.
What are your thoughts on this offense, Matt? This is another interesting matchup. With this, the over/under is actually not too low, surprisingly. At 47 isn't that bad. Chargers looked pretty decent last week against a pretty good. Their offense looked pretty good against a good defense. So I think there could be some underrated fantasy goodness in this one. What are your thoughts, particularly of the Miami side? We haven't seen them yet this year. Obviously, the cornerback news definitely changes how they might attack this defense.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Parker is going to, as Ian said, probably get some of the shadow coverage from Hayward, so that should seemingly benefit Stills and Landry. Right now, Stills has an over-under of 32.5 receiving yards, and he's kind of a boomer bust guy. I don't think that Miami is going to try to push the ball all that much, even though that's sort of like Jay Cutler's way of existing in the NFL. But I think they're going to try to run the ball. But, I mean, Kenny Stills, I think he probably has some decent yardage in this game just because he has a pretty good matchup. Landry, of course, could be a target guy in the slot, but I think Miami in general is just going to de-emphasize the passing game a little bit and look to Jay Ajayi to get a lot of yards on the ground.
Ian, let's talk some other injuries. Anything else notable? I know that we have some of the Monday night stuff with Janoris Jenkins being doubtful and Odell maybe looking probable now. I would say let's probably avoid those just because people are getting ready for this 1 o'clock slate. Anything else for
sure.
this Sunday slate?
One interesting note: Vance McDonald for the Steelers is out. They traded for him a little bit before the season, hoping to kind of get a field stretcher there at tight end. And it's going to be the Jesse James show again this week. So it's, kind of a big plotter, dad running type of tight end guy, but Steelers at home, and he should be the only guy they trot out there. And I know Freeman likes Jesse.
I do not like Jesse. I liked him last week going against the Browns. I basically like Brian Mears when he's lining up against the Browns at the tight end position. But I mean, Jesse James, I think he's fine, but I don't think there's anything that's particularly special about this spot going against the Vikings. But I would tend to look at, basically anyone on that skill position side for the Steelers. I think it's pretty fine to stack them with Ben Roethlisberger at home as favorites.
Cool. Matt, you had just put out a article going over some of the props just while we have a moment here, and I'll look through some questions while you do this. Anything stand out to you as just interesting data-wise, like a prop that was a little bit higher, lower than you might expect based on our projections?
Yeah, I mean, we can stick there with the Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger at home. Obviously, people know about his home road splits. It's an interesting thing because he does have a tougher matchup against the Vikings defense, but it's still Ben Roethlisberger at home. The over-under for pass attempts is 23.5. The over-under for passing yards is 260.5. In the last 3 years, so thinking about the offense that they have now with Le'Veon Bell, with Antonio Brown as the main pieces there in that offense, Roethlisberger as a home favorite has completed 25.8 passes and had 333.7 yards passing. So basically he's at a discount of like 60-ish yards or so, 70-ish yards. I think that's pretty steep considering what he's routinely done at home. So I'm pretty bullish on that passing offense in general. And then I think also looking at the high-scoring game between the Patriots and the Saints, James White has basically been more of a receiver than a runner to this point in his career. He did get 10 carries, a career high 10 carries last week. So there is something to be said about maybe him transitioning into more of a complete type of back, but he's still a receiver. The over under right now is 2.5 for him. He's played 16 games, including the playoffs with Brady in the past year. He's gone under 3 pass receptions only 3 times. I think he's a pretty good bet to go over the 2.5 there. And I also like him at over 24.5 yards. Yeah.
So I think this is interesting. White, whether he's a cash game play or whether he's more of a GPP play is, I guess, something that people will debate. But people will talk about this week is like the top 4 quarterbacks. I think this week is like more dictated by the bottom, like the cheap running backs. We have James White, we have Tariq Cohen, Jacquizz Rodgers, even Kamara. Like there's like all those guys that are right in the 4K range, even high 3K range that like nailing those guys, or if they disappoint, like that's where GPPs are going to swing. What are your thoughts on those cheap running backs, Ian?
Yeah, I think you mentioned the guys we're all looking at these. I think James White and Alvin Kamara are super interesting because they're both kind of finding themselves in shootout situations in this game in New Orleans. So, I saw a quote this morning from Sean Payton saying how they never even dreamed of giving Adrian Peterson a featured role like he had in Minnesota. So if both these offenses are planning on spreading things out, getting the ball down the field a lot, you would think that they'd have their passing down back in the game more often, say Gillislee or Peterson, but we'll see how it plays out.
Cool. All right, just going to run through a couple questions we got here. Matt, I'll throw this one to you. People were really interested in this Raiders offense. This is something we've discussed a lot in our content, but I mean, really juicy total, 28.5. Almost a 2-touchdown spread here. And these guys aren't going to go like completely overlooked. It's not like Amari Cooper's going to have 3% ownership, but because of these high total games, like what other week are you going to get the Raiders versus the Jets at like pretty low ownership? You know? So I guess my question is these guys are also pricey, which could lower their ownership, but a lot of people are interested in Marshawn at 6K. What are your thoughts on them and just the offense in general?
So I think it's pretty hard to fade a home favorite running back in a huge total game like that. But the thing that is a little bit scary about Marshawn is that he is already out of the gate splitting snaps and touches with the two running backs behind him. So I don't have a problem at all with going with Marshawn. I wouldn't do it in cash games the way that you normally think of a home favorite as being fairly safe for cash. I don't think he has that benefit. But yeah, if you want to throw him in some GPP lineups, I think that makes sense because it's definitely a good spot for him.
Yeah, for sure. I think that Levitan had said earlier this week in one of his pieces of content that he's got to be one of the favorites to score a touchdown. Like if you're just looking at touchdown equity, Marshawn's going to be up there for sure.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Let's see here. Question about the Carolina Panthers offense. Ian, I'll throw this one to you. McCaffrey was a week 1 darling. Not that he had a bad game by any means, but now is going to go maybe a little bit overlooked going against the Bills, who didn't particularly look great last week. What are your thoughts on like Cam and McCaffrey and Kelvin? There's maybe some overlooked guys with some talent,
Yeah, I think the overlooked guy there, and it's been this way for a while, is still Jonathan Stewart. They drafted McCaffrey 8th overall, and they showed in week 1 that they're going to run a lot of their offense through him. But Stewart ended up with 5 more carries than McCaffrey and even pitched in 2 catches still. He's still their guy when they get inside the red zone. And, in a home game against the Bills, you can see them potentially playing with a lead, which is going to set up for some potentially more carries for Stewart. But you mentioned Funches as well. He's a guy we haven't quite seen put together, but he's on the field all the time with Benjamin and 2 wide receiver sets. So, Bills have had a few Gaines and Johnson were on the injury report this week as far as cornerbacks were concerned. They're fine, but giving up a lot of size to those guys on the outside. And we'll see if Cam's shoulders may be a little bit healthier in week 2 and if they open up the offense at all.
And just to add something quickly onto what Ian said, Jay Stu even last week got all the touches in the 10-yard line. So he is still the guy. I think, Marshawn, obviously a great bet to score a touchdown, but Jonathan Stewart, home favorite, getting the work in the 10-yard line. He's also a pretty decent bet to get a touchdown.
Last question before we get out of here. Matt, do you have any strong kicker takes? This is your brand.
I don't have any strong kicker takes, unfortunately. But what I would say, though, is that we have this excellent article on the site called Deconstructing the Vegas Lines by Ben Gretsch of RotoViz. And he gives some excellent kicker analysis in that piece. So instead of listening to me fake kicker analysis for 30 seconds, go read that piece. It's very quick and very full of actionable information.
Yeah, great piece for sure. All right, we're going to end it there. We are going to try to keep these 15, 20 minutes just to hit on the notable injury stuff because I know that you guys want to get off and go build some lineups. We got 40 minutes left. So we'll end it there. Thanks for joining us, guys. Good luck in week 2, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Good luck.